It only takes a few seconds. You don't see it, feel it, or smell it, but the effects of medical x-rays can cause cancer. In fact, some believe more cancer death than we thought 20 years ago. Medical x-rays, we believed in them for years. They save tens of thousands of lives each year. When you need it, you should have an x-ray. But some doctors are concerned with the overuse of x-rays, and the issue of safety is now dividing the scientific community.
Medical radiation diagnostic is very safe today.
The old idea that there was some safe dose of radiation is not correct.
There's no absolutely safe dose of radiation.
Only the good side and not the bad side was showing up when the procedure was discovered in 1895. The x-ray machine then and now is called an indispensable medical tool. Many people believe taking an x-ray is as safe as taking an aspirin. But not Dr. Roland Pinston of Stanford University, a recognized authority on x-rays who says there is growing concern.
We found that the risk of cancer is greater than we thought it was. At the same time, we found that the risks of genetic disease are probably less than we thought they were.
The x-ray controversy can be confusing, but one thing is clear. The more you know about x-rays, the more you can help yourself be protected by them and from them. Tomorrow, find out why women are so vulnerable to x-rays. I'm Sherry Sellers.
The Oklahoma City Animal Shelter handles about 37,000 animals a year, and only about 2,000 of the animals are ever adopted out. As a way of easing the crowded conditions, the City Council has contracted to sell cats and dogs to the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center for medical research. But before OU can buy the animals, there must be a holding period at the shelter, 15 days for stray animals and 30 days if it's believed the animal has an owner. Animal lover groups told city leaders they are concerned the research may be cruel to the animals.
We'd like to point out to those who were not in attendance at Judiciary Council committee meetings that there are no federal laws ensuring freedom from pain or stress for the animals in medical research. And the city should not attempt to provide research animals against the wishes of the citizens of this city.
OU has agreed to pay $35 for each cat and dog it buys. The research center says it will not request more than 1,000 animals a year. And officials at OU welcome animal lover groups to inspect the research operation to see that cats and dogs are not being mistreated. Ed Stewart, Action 4.
Today's testimony will center on Penn Square's amazing ability to churn out and market energy loans to other commercial banks from coast to coast. Loans that once held the glitter of fast buck profits from the oil and gas fields of the Southwest.
Chairman Ferdinand St. Germain and the members of the House Banking Committee want to know how some big banks got tied up in the Penn Square Bank fiasco. Penn Square acted as a kind of loan production office for several banks which didn't have a physical presence in Oklahoma. Penn Square would originate and document the loans and sell them to other banks in return for a fee. Officers of Continental Illinois Bank were the first to testify. Continental is the nation's 7th largest bank and participated in more than $1 billion in loans generated by Penn Square. Continental President John Perkins said Penn Square misled his bank, but Perkins also admitted some of his own employees may have made errors. One of those employees was fired last July. John Lytle was in charge of the Continental division that bought Penn Square loans. Committee members were interested in Lytle's personal dealings with Penn Square.
I don't think as an individual you could go to Oklahoma City and Penn Square out of the goodness of their heart give you a loan of $560,000 on a piece of property outside of the city of Chicago. I'd like for you to answer that question.
In my opinion, as a credit man, the loan that I had at Penn Square was a good, solid loan. One of the best evidences of a good, solid loan is when you decide to pay it, you can pay it.
Continental officers were anxious to pass the buck, to blame someone besides themselves for Penn Square Bank's problems. And while committee members didn't absolve Continental, They did agree that Continental wasn't alone in making mistakes. As Chalmers Wiley, a representative from Ohio, put it, the failure of Penn Square Bank is the work of a cast of thousands. Bill Ross, Action 4, Washington.
You know what happened to you. You know how you got sucked in. You know how you were taken. And you were taken. The responsibility, somebody might not put it on your shoulder, but I'm going to put it on your shoulder. When you tell me you don't want disclosure, well, then if you don't want disclosure and you want to remain a top officer in your credit union and you want that responsibility, you better hell find out.
Dressed in prison garb and no shoes, 29-year-old Linda Ann Thompson was led handcuffed into district court today to be arraigned in connection with a butcher knife slaying of her 9-year-old son, David. The judge ordered Thompson held without bond. Witnesses to the crime allege Mrs. Thompson said she had to free her son from the devil and that the murder was a sacrifice in a religious ceremony. The boy died yesterday at an Oklahoma City hospital after being stabbed 4 times at their home in Hera. Emergency rescue units were called to the scene to find the boy bleeding in a neighbor's front yard. Apparently, Linda Thompson was no stranger to the Department of Human Services. On numerous occasions, caseworkers were sent on complaint calls to Mrs. Thompson's home to check on the welfare of the boy. But on each visit, the social workers came away with the impression that Linda Thompson was a fit mother and that the child was in safe hands.
We never had any indication that his home life was not satisfactory. It might have not been what you and I would want in our home life, but there was never any indication that this child should have been taken out of that home.
But one neighbor viewed Thompson as an epileptic with a bad temper and some very strange religious beliefs.
She told Mrs. Connor that she was just afraid of what she might do to David, that the demons were in her. That's what she said, her exact words. But Miss Connor, she's got an elderly lady living there with her, and she was afraid what might happen to them.
Several of the neighbors say they knew that Linda Thompson had been battling mental illness for some time. In fact, one neighbor who wished not to be identified said a night didn't go by that you couldn't hear screams coming from the Thompson house. The Department of Human Services acknowledges that they received several complaint calls from neighbors concerned about the welfare of the child. Apparently, they were one call too late. In Hera, Kurt Autry, Action 4.
This is the modern Army, filled with computers and technicians. The Army has been beating the bushes for the past 10 years, recruiting women for its highly skilled positions. This is also the modern Army. The military prides itself on placing thousands of females in formerly male occupations. The Army now wants to do an abrupt about-face. A soon-to-be-released Army study recommends the elimination of certain combat-related jobs for women and the addition of strength tests for all soldiers.
The biggest problem is the lifting, I would say. But then again, there's many ways of getting around it, like the double wrenches, using 2 wrenches, and calling for help.
Many Army women have overcome their job obstacles. Others, like Spec 4 Norma McMacken, are up against a biological barrier. McMacken will remain assigned to light duties until her baby is born next May. She's had problems in the past fitting into her traditional male career.
I was in Germany for 2 years. Well, I had a lot of problems there with the guys as far as I'd be doing something they did would take the tools from me and tell me, hey, you can't do it, you know, and push me off to the side. And for a while there, I just let them do it. Then I finally decided, well, hey, I'm not learning anything, letting the guys do this to me, and put my foot down and said, take my tools back and say, hey, I'm going to do it now, you know.
I used to be just one of the, probably the worst. Didn't believe in this equal rights at all. And I've had to back up and regroup here and say, yeah, they can do it.
Nearly half of the Army's 65,000 enlisted females work in jobs requiring great strength. Yet tests show that only 3% of all Army women are actually strong enough for such demands. The new strength exams will prohibit weaker women from being placed in strenuous occupations. Those same standards will also weed out males without much muscle. Scott Wallace, Action 4 at Fort Sill.
Is that when you have a lot of children, sometimes if the parents don't watch them, then they'll destroy the landscape. Where the demand is at, and that's the big. In the state of Oklahoma, the future of apartment living will become increasingly more a fact and a way of life for people with families and childless couples too. Unfortunately, the dream of owning your own home, or the American dream of owning your own home, will become more and more an impossibility for more and more people. They will be backed up, let's say, into apartments. The apartment industry will have to, and will, increase its type of amenities for properties in such a way that apartment living will become even more and more desirable in the future. Construction. When the family is a definite demand, then there's always a lag for apartments to meet that type of demand, since apartments are originally not designed to meet that type of demand.
So far this afternoon, we've had very few people come in.
Why is that?
Well, we've been told that basically the individuals were allowed to go back into the area if they would sign a release at the checkpoint going into the area, recognizing that the area was a dangerous location and no one could be held at blame or at fault for them being in the area.
The cleanup continued today in Midwest City, where Thursday morning's chemical fire caused 300 residents to be evacuated. The workers were forced to wear protective clothing because of the toxic nature of the chemicals. Late this afternoon, residents were told they could return to their homes if they so wished. Some did, and decided the fumes were still too strong.
I could still smell it. It made my wife sick. She had to go to the doctor, and no, I'm not going to stay. It doesn't bother me, but if it bothers her, we're not coming back. I called the fire department knocking on doors, and I asked him, I said, "You known about this for over a week now." I said, "You known what's in that trailer. Why didn't y'all just hook up to it and haul it off somewhere where you wasn't around all these residents and get rid of it?"
The trailer's owner, Jack Dennis of Blanchard, told officials he stored chemicals in the trailer in an effort to resell them. The trailer has been in the area for about 15 years. Fire officials tried to remove some of the chemicals last week after residents complained, but the effort was futile.
We had a court order to seize the materials in there because there seemed to be leaking containers and materials that were not registered for sale. But when we went out and tried to move the trailer, we found that the containers were spilling and would break if we did move it. We'd string chemical down the highway, so that wasn't feasible.
The Environmental Protection Agency was called twice about the matter, but as of yet have not shown up at the site. Investigators are inspecting the arson case and will present their findings to the district attorney. Kevin Ogle, Action 4 in Midwest City.
Take a deep breath. Blow it out. Blow, blow, blow.
The hope would be that we would have no more indigenous or domestic measles occurring anywhere in the United States. Unfortunately, there will be measles occurring other places in the world, and you can't keep it out. But if indeed the number of susceptibles in Oklahoma and the rest of the country is very low, there won't really be a potential for the disease to get started. So our objective is to make certain that as kids become 15 months of age, all the new ones get their immunizations at that time.
Even for these youngsters, life is competitive. If they do well in school, they pass. If not, they could flunk. And hundreds of students are retained each year. But some Oklahoma City school administrators believe more students should be held back. Under the administration's proposed retention plan, a teacher would have the final word in whether a child passes or fails. And two basic tests would be used to determine the student's ability: the PRI, an early developmental test, and DMI, a test of the child's math skills. Those tests are under a hot attack by the AFT. Dave Renfro, president of the union, says both tests would be unfair to the student.
The teachers believe that we are competent in developing our own tests and using those tests as tools, and that we will be able to develop our own criteria for promotion and retention, and that it will be a more valid and more realistic tool for proper evaluation than a computerized, mechanically monitored test.
We use the computers now to record the grades of students that the teachers submit for their grade cards,
And we have, with each passing month, worked out the bugs in the computer system and will continue to do so. So no decision about a child's retention is going to be based on a faulty computer run.
Superintendent Payzant says the policy would assure fairness and would promote learning. The school board will be voting on the proposal in the next few weeks. Meantime, the AFT will be working to ensure that the plan fails. Debbie Mash, Action 4.
It doesn't matter which one, just off for one of them.
Thousands of high schoolers in the Oklahoma City School District are learning algebra from Saxon textbooks. Some teachers and school administrators claim the book makes math simple, but the battle over the Saxon text has been a long and complicated controversy. Today, the American Federation of Teachers charged that the Oklahoma City School Board made a procedural error in the approval process of the Saxon text. But Dr. Jess Lindley testified that the procedure was changed, not violated.
We had some concern because of the national publicity being given to the Saxon textbooks about their supply, so that we felt we needed to move expeditiously in order that we would be able to get books at all.
The school board ruled they had just cause for their procedural change, so there will be no change in algebra books. For now, the Saxon text will remain in the classroom. Debbie Mash, Action 4.
When the corporation is willing to put out a little bit of money and to give their employees an afternoon off to enjoy something like this, and I hope you consider this enjoyment, they're seeing the benefits. I would say that these individuals participating are probably more productive than their counterparts that are sitting behind a desk, very sedentary. And I think that's a general statement we could probably support.
The Regents went into executive session this morning. It only lasted about 20 minutes. When they returned, Regent Dan Little made the motion.
I move that Dr. William Banowsky be reinstated as president of the University of Oklahoma, effective November 1st, 1982, at the same remuneration as previously set.
You've heard the motion. Is there any comment from any of the regents? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carried. Well, I wondered if he was really serious about it, or he was just hadn't become adjusted out there yet, and maybe was a little bit homesick for Oklahoma. His boys are here, you know. Two of the boys are in college. And I wondered if, you know, if that feeling wouldn't pass away, but it didn't. It persisted, and he just wanted to come back.
From the Board of Regents' viewpoint, were there any stipulations that you made as the Board of Regents to make sure that Dr. Banowsky would be here for a while?
We wanted to be assured of that, and he has assured us that he will be.
Anything in a contract?
It's not written.
I'm going to a new job. I'm the first man to hold this job. This is not a traditional Chamber of Commerce executive post. I wouldn't have looked twice at it.
But being president of the University of Oklahoma is a job that Bill Banowsky has looked twice at. The first time around in 1978, at 42 years old, Bill Banowsky became the youngest president in the history of OU. Coming from the presidency of Pepperdine University in California, Banowsky told Action 4 that education was his life.
I chose some years back the work of higher education. In fact, I think to work in higher education is the most gratifying experience. Since the days of the ancient Greeks, when we first built these academies where scholars would be able in a relaxed and reflective fashion to teach and lead young people, these institutions have had a wonderful tradition.
Admitting today that leaving Oklahoma was a mistake, Banowsky still faces many of the same problems he did 43 days ago when he left the university. The university's proposed multi-million-dollar energy center is still far behind in raising funds, and OU has still not reached the academic reputation that Banowsky had fought to upgrade. Kurt Autry, Action 4.
A year ago, Yukon lost a tough game to Putman City West, but now there's a bigger game being played, and the players have $114,000 to go. That's dollars, not yards. They are the 25 fans who 3 years ago funded Yukon High's football stadium, but now the bank's thrown their penalty flag.
The debt has not been paid on. We had to call in guarantors because by our rules and regulations, that's what's required of us.
The stadium is waiting for a cleanup, and it may clean out the pockets of its underwriters. Reen Huckabee is Yukon High's athletic director. He's also one of the stadium's underwriters.
Well, we do owe the money. The bank is right. We're stuck. We're at an impasse right now. I think we'll come up with something. The only answer is probably a fundraiser. Because, like I say, the school board can't do anything about it. The stadium fund actually can't do anything about it. We can't go out immediately and raise $125,000.
Huckabee says he's hopeful the community will pitch in to help pay off the debt. He says this is one game the debtors don't want to lose. Debbie Mash, Action 4 in Yukon.
Residents and interns, or we're students? Third year students. Yeah, and like 3 of my patients have.
This should be a cabinet level position because, and we will meet with the president when we get back next week, Mr. Simpson, who is the chairman over in the Senate side of the Veterans Affairs Committee, will meet with President Reagan and talk to him about this situation. The third largest budget in the government is the Veterans Administration. It's the second largest employer of people.
I hear the news reports, and they talk about Dr. Burton's treatment being a controversial method of treatment. Building the body's immune system to fight the cancer cell, to me, is not a controversial treatment. It's a common sense treatment.